They may have walked away smiling, but make no mistake, they do not escape what they did to you. You think they moved on. You think they forgot. But the one thing a narcissist can never outrun is the truth of their own pattern. If this resonates with you, pause for a second and ask yourself, have I been trying to get closure from someone who is structurally incapable of giving it? If so, this is your sign to shift that energy back to yourself. Narcissists rely on denial, minimization, and rewriting history because accountability threatens the very structure of their identity. At the core of narcissism is a fragile, unstable sense of self that cannot tolerate shame. When they hurt you through manipulation, betrayal, gaslighting, or emotional cruelty, admitting it would require them to confront feelings of inadequacy and defectiveness they have spent a lifetime trying to outrun. So instead of processing guilt in a healthy way, they distort reality to protect themselves. Denial is the first shield. They will flatly reject events that clearly happened. Conversations you remember vividly are dismissed as misunderstandings. Promises they broke are reframed as things you imagined. This isn't always calculated in a conscious, villainous way. Often it is automatic. Their psyche cannot integrate the idea that they caused harm, so the event is mentally edited until it feels less threatening. Minimization follows closely behind. If denial doesn't work, they shrink the offense. It wasn't that bad. You're overreacting. Everyone argues like that. Your pain is downgraded to inconvenience. Your trauma becomes drama. By reducing the severity of what they did, they protect their self-image as reasonable, superior, or justified. Then comes the rewriting of history. This is where the narrative fully flips. They may retell the story to others with themselves as the victim. Your reactions to their mistreatment become proof of your instability. The timeline shifts, the context disappears. Slowly, a new version of reality forms, one where they were pushed, provoked, or misunderstood. Over time, they may even believe this revised script. These defenses serve one purpose: self-preservation. Accountability requires empathy, and empathy requires tolerating discomfort. For someone organized around narcissistic defenses, discomfort feels annihilating. So the truth gets reshaped, the story gets altered, and your lived experience becomes collateral damage in their attempt to escape shame. Psychological consequences eventually surface as shame, rage, or collapse because unprocessed guilt does not disappear. It mutates. A narcissist may appear unaffected after harming you. They may seem calm, indifferent, even triumphant. But beneath that exterior, there is an unstable emotional system constantly working to suppress deeper feelings they cannot consciously tolerate. When someone lacks the capacity to reflect and repair, emotions don't resolve. They accumulate pressure. Shame is the central fault line, not healthy guilt, which says, I did something bad. Narcissistic shame says, I am bad. That distinction is critical because if the entire self feels defective, the mind will do almost anything to avoid touching that feeling. When reminders of their behavior surface, maybe through losing you, being criticized, or facing failure, that buried shame can flicker into awareness. It feels intolerable. Instead of processing it, they convert it into anger. That's why rage becomes such a common outcome. Narcissistic rage is not simply irritation. It is a defensive explosion designed to push shame back down. If you confront them, they lash out. If you set boundaries, they escalate. If life frustrates them, they look for someone to blame. Rage restores a temporary sense of superiority. It flips vulnerability into dominance. Over time, however, this constant defense is exhausting. The more relationships they cycle through, the more conflicts accumulate. The more they age or lose status, the harder it becomes to maintain the illusion of perfection. This is where collapse can happen. Collapse doesn't always mean public breakdown. It can look like depression, chronic bitterness, substance misuse, paranoia, or profound emptiness. Without steady external validation, their internal instability becomes harder to manage. The consequences are psychological because they are structural. When someone cannot metabolize accountability, they are condemned to repeat emotional defenses instead of evolving. The shame never integrates. The anger never truly resolves. And the collapse, whether subtle or dramatic, reflects a self that cannot sustain the weight of its own unexamined patterns. They project guilt onto others because accepting it internally would fracture their carefully constructed self-image. Projection is not just deflection, it is a psychological survival strategy. When a narcissist hurts you, lies to you, betrays you, or manipulates you, the emotional residue of that behavior doesn't simply vanish, but instead of processing it as remorse, they relocate it. The guilt that should belong to them is assigned to you. You'll often notice this shift immediately after you confront them. Suddenly, you are accused of being selfish, abusive, dramatic, unstable, or ungrateful. The conversation pivots away from their behavior and onto your character. This is not random. It is a calculated psychological maneuver, sometimes conscious, often automatic, to protect their fragile ego from collapse. If they can make you the problem, they don't have to sit with the discomfort of being the one who caused harm. What makes projection particularly destabilizing is how convincing it can feel. Narcissists deliver accusations with certainty. They speak with authority. They may even recruit others to validate their version of events. Over time, you may start questioning yourself. That confusion is not an accident. When guilt is successfully transferred, they regain emotional equilibrium while you absorb the psychological weight. But projection has limits. The internal insecurity driving it never disappears. It lingers underneath the blame. Each time they accuse someone else, they reinforce the very instability they are trying to avoid. The need to constantly externalize fault keeps them dependent on conflict. They require someone to carry the shame for them. And here's the critical truth. Projection does not resolve guilt. It displaces it. The underlying insecurity remains intact. It surfaces as defensiveness, hypersensitivity to criticism, chronic comparison, or relentless attempts to assert superiority. Even when you are no longer present, the pattern continues with someone else because the real target of their projection is not you. It is the unbearable fear that, without distortion, they would have to confront who they truly are. Loss of control over you becomes a long-term psychological wound for a narcissist because control is not just a preference for them, it is regulation. It is how they stabilize their fragile sense of self. When you were engaged in the dynamic, whether through defending yourself, explaining, reacting, or trying to fix things, you were participating in a system that centered them. Your emotional responses reassured them that they mattered, that they had impact, that they were powerful. When that control disappears, when you detach, set boundaries, go no contact, or simply stop reacting, something destabilizing happens internally. It is not just about losing you as a person. It is about losing access to a mirror that reflected back their significance, Narcissistic personalities rely heavily on external validation to maintain self-esteem. When you step away, that stream of reinforcement dries up. At first, they may respond with escalation. Hoovering, sudden affection, guilt tactics, anger, smear campaigns, all attempts to re-establish dominance. The goal is not intimacy, it is restoration of control. If those tactics fail, the wound deepens. Being unable to pull you back challenges their belief in their own superiority and influence. It contradicts the internal narrative that they are irresistible, powerful, or always one step ahead. This is why your indifference can provoke more reaction than your anger ever did. Anger still engages. Indifference signals detachment. It communicates that they no longer occupy the psychological center of your world. For someone organized around control, that realization cuts deeply. Over time, the inability to regain authority over you becomes a quiet but persistent injury. Even if they move on to other relationships, the memory of losing grip can linger as irritation, resentment, or the need to prove themselves elsewhere. It reinforces an insecurity they work hard to suppress, the fear of being replaceable, irrelevant, or powerless. And because they rarely process loss in a reflective way, the wound does not transform into growth. It hardens into defensiveness and repetition. Their reputation may remain intact publicly, but privately their instability grows because narcissism is deeply invested in image management. What the outside world sees is often highly curated: charm, competence, charisma, confidence. Many narcissistic individuals are skilled at impression management. They understand social hierarchies. They know how to perform likability. They may even appear generous or successful. This public persona becomes a protective shield. But maintaining that image requires constant energy. It depends on admiration, validation, and carefully controlled narratives. When they harm someone, especially in intimate relationships, the damage is rarely visible to outsiders. Abuse often happens behind closed doors, through subtle manipulation, emotional withdrawal, belittling comments, or gaslighting. Because it is not dramatic or physical, it can be easily concealed. So publicly, they may continue thriving, friends may admire them, colleagues may respect them, social media may reflect a polished life. This external stability can feel invalidating to you, especially if you experienced a very different version of them. It can create the illusion that they escaped consequences entirely. Privately, however, instability accumulates. The gap between the false self and the authentic self widens. When someone relies on a constructed persona, they must constantly monitor and defend it. Criticism feels threatening. Rejection feels catastrophic. Any crack in the image provokes anxiety. This creates chronic tension beneath the surface. Intimate relationships are where that instability leaks out. The closer someone gets, the harder it becomes to sustain the mask. Irritability, control issues, emotional volatility, and devaluation begin to appear. Because genuine vulnerability would expose their insecurity, they double down on defensiveness instead. Over time, this split between public admiration and private dysfunction becomes psychologically costly. The more they invest in looking strong, the less they develop true internal resilience. The more they protect the facade, the more fragile it becomes. While the world may still applaud them, internally they are managing fear. Fear of exposure, irrelevance, failure, and abandonment. The image survives. The instability quietly expands. Aging, failure, and loss of supply intensify their internal reckoning because narcissism depends heavily on external reinforcement. When someone builds their identity around admiration, attractiveness, status, success, or influence, those factors are not just preferences, they are pillars holding up a fragile self-concept. As long as life provides consistent validation, the system remains stable, but time and circumstance inevitably disrupt that flow. Aging can be particularly destabilizing. Physical appearance may change, social relevance may shift. Newer, younger, or more accomplished individuals enter the environment. For someone whose self-worth is tied to comparison and superiority, this natural evolution feels like erosion. Instead of adapting with maturity, they may react with denial, cosmetic overcompensation, bitterness, or intensified competition. The goal becomes preserving the illusion of dominance rather than accepting change. Failure carries a similar threat. Career setbacks, financial strain, public criticism, or unmet ambitions challenge the narrative of exceptionalism. Healthy individuals can integrate failure as feedback. A narcissistic structure struggles to do that. Setbacks are not processed as learning opportunities, but as humiliations. The internal shame that has long been suppressed begins to press against the surface. To manage this, they may blame others, rewrite circumstances, or inflate new fantasies of greatness. Loss of supply is often the most destabilizing factor. Supply refers to the admiration, attention, emotional reactions, and validation they extract from others. When relationships end, when people set boundaries, or when social circles shrink, that stream diminishes. Without consistent reinforcement, the underlying insecurity becomes more visible to them. Emptiness can intensify. Irritability may increase. Desperation for new validation can grow more obvious. These life transitions act like stress tests. They expose the lack of internal grounding. Someone who has not cultivated empathy, accountability, or authentic connection faces these changes without the emotional tools needed to adapt. Instead of evolving into deeper self-awareness, they often double down on defenses, becoming more rigid, more resentful, or more frantic in pursuit of affirmation. Time moves forward, but their emotional development remains stalled, making each new loss feel heavier than the last. Your healing removes their power because it dismantles the emotional leverage they once relied on. When you were entangled in the dynamic, questioning yourself, defending your reality, seeking their approval, or trying to repair what they kept breaking, you were still psychologically tethered to them. Your reactions, even your pain, confirmed that they mattered deeply in your internal world. That mattered to them more than you may realize. Narcissistic personalities depend on impact. Whether the reaction is admiration, fear, guilt, anger, or longing, what stabilizes them is knowing they can move you. When you begin healing, something shifts. You stop chasing explanations. You stop trying to win arguments that were designed to confuse you. You stop performing emotional labor for someone who never reciprocated it. That withdrawal of energy changes the entire power structure. Healing also sharpens perception. You start recognizing patterns instead of personalizing them. The love bombing no longer feels magical. It feels strategic. The devaluation no longer feels deserved. It feels predictable. The gaslighting no longer erases your memory. It highlights manipulation. As your clarity increases, their tactics lose effectiveness. What once destabilized you now simply informs you. This is where you become a mirror, not by confronting them, exposing them, or seeking revenge, but by no longer participating in the illusion. Your calm becomes contrast. Your boundaries reflect what they lack. Your emotional regulation exposes their volatility. Without saying a word, your growth reveals the dysfunction of the dynamic. That reflection can be deeply uncomfortable for them. It challenges their narrative that you were the problem. It disrupts their belief that you were weak, overly sensitive, or incapable without them. Even if they never admit it, your stability contradicts the story they told themselves. When you heal, you reclaim authorship over your experience. You stop orbiting their ego and start centering your own well-being. And once that shift happens, the control they once had over your thoughts, emotions, and decisions quietly dissolves, leaving them to confront a reality where they no longer dictate the emotional climate. Narcissists cannot outrun the patterns that eventually isolate them because patterns are not accidents, they are structures. Every relationship follows a familiar arc: idealization, devaluation, and eventual rupture. At first, there is charm, intensity, and rapid bonding. They mirror values, accelerate intimacy, and create the illusion of profound connection. This stage secures admiration and emotional investment, but it is unsustainable because it is built on performance, not authenticity. Over time, cracks appear. The same sensitivity to criticism resurfaces. The same need for control creeps in. The same subtle put-downs, shifting blame, emotional withdrawal, or triangulation begins. The partner who was once idealized becomes insufficient. Expectations rise, empathy shrinks, conflict escalates. Eventually, either the other person leaves or the narcissist discards them in search of fresh validation. This cycle does not correct itself because it is driven by unexamined defenses. Without insight or accountability, there is no interruption to the pattern. Each new relationship carries the same blueprint. The faces change, but the dynamics remain eerily consistent. Over time, this repetition narrows their world. Former partners disengage, friends grow cautious, family members limit access, colleagues notice volatility. Even if some remain in their orbit, the depth of connection diminishes, trust erodes, emotional intimacy becomes rare. What replaces it is transaction, relationships based on utility, status, or convenience rather than mutual care. Isolation for a narcissistic personality is rarely dramatic at first. It accumulates quietly. People interact with them but reveal less. They maintain networks but lack closeness. They receive attention but not authentic understanding. Because vulnerability feels threatening, they never develop the emotional skills required to sustain long-term reciprocal bonds. The tragedy is structural. The very defenses designed to protect them, superiority, denial, projection, control, prevent the growth necessary for real connection. And as repetition continues, opportunities for repair diminish. They do not lose people because of one mistake. They lose people because the pattern remains unchanged, slowly narrowing the space in which genuine connection can survive.